Hello, folks. I don't look like it, but this is Jim Worthen, and the show is Worthen One-on-One. This will be all gone, and my hair trimmed next. In fact, Dave Bazinet, a great friend and barber, is taking care of me tomorrow for the first time in 3 months. Those of you who've watched the show know that this is a result of going in December 12th and having my hip replaced, and then recuperation, and it's also the result of living alone. There's no woman to take care of me, or even friend or man. It's just been a slow process of rehabilitation, but the surgery worked. No limp, no pain. The only time I have pain is when they make me do physical therapy and stretch and twist, and they're horrible people. They don't realize I just want to sleep. We're going to start our show off with a clip. The show today is about the mission conference, February 3rd. We'll get into how it's put together. I think it's the 25th year. And with Chuck Curtis, who is the pastor, lay pastor and director of it for all those years. We no longer go through people's biographies and ask where they were born and everything, but a lot of history comes out in it. And I think I remember the inspiration for the mission conference almost 30 years ago, and I'll ask Chuck about it.
For over 20 years, the Santa Barbara Mission Conference has brought in world-class theologians, practitioners, and thought leaders to inform, inspire, and engage followers of Jesus in our city and beyond.
Conferences are adapting to a busy, fast-changing world, and ours is no exception. We're still hosting a world-class speaker, activist, pastor, lawyer, and author of the book Brown Church, Dr. Robert Chow Romero. But this year, we've tightened up the schedule a bit, and we've asked Dr. Chow Romero specifically to speak us into action.
We'll hear about his latest work, worship together, and then break into seminars, addressing in a faith context some of the social issues we face in our communities: human trafficking, homelessness and housing, immigration, and creation care. After lunch, we'll reconvene to ask, how do we engage to bring about healthy change? Local practitioners will lead workshops designed to plug the inspiration of faith into the work of healing and justice in our neighborhoods.
So if you're longing to live out your faith, you'll find the inspiration, tools, resources, and relationships that glorify Christ while bringing flourishing to the broken parts of our community. We invite you to come join us at the Santa Barbara Mission Conference.
Chuck, this is the 25th anniversary.
22nd. This is our 22nd Santa Barbara Mission Conference.
Okay.
Yes. We're not quite at 25 yet, but stick around. We'll be there.
Oh, yeah. And you've been on probably 6 or 8 times, or we've had guests who were, I think we had twice had pastors, one a female and one a male, that were at part of the conference that were from professors at Fuller.
One time you landed Mark Laberton, the president of Fuller. He stepped down after 10 years about a year or so ago. But that was a pretty good catch, because Mark is a very well-known seminary president.
If I was fishing for men, you were Peter in the boat that got them for me. And, so that was a good catch.
That was a good catch.
It was due to you.
Yeah.
The inspiration for this, as I recall, came from an educational trip by you. Tell us about that.
Well, I can talk about that at some length. I joined First Press in '99, And I got active right away, and they put me on the mission team the next year. And he said, "You want to be on this committee or this team?" And I said, "Yes." It interested me. And actually, just before that, Annabelle Miller, you remember Annabelle Miller?
Sure do.
The late Annabelle Miller, she grew up in China with missionary parents. She said, "Chuck, you should go down to San Diego for this mission conference put on by the Presbyterian Church." And I said, well, interesting, maybe. So I did. I said, okay, I'm game. So I went down to that, and it was a moving experience. The people there, the people sitting around the table, the presentation, Harold Kurtz was the speaker, the plenary speaker for that, and very compelling. He'd spent more than 50 years in Ethiopia as a missionary. And so that started stirring in me. And so actually, it was after that, then the church said, "We want you to be on the session. We're going to assign you to the mission and evangelism team." We started calling them teams then. And so I did. And then because of that and the San Diego experience, it really took hold. And I said, this is the area in the church where I want to serve, the mission.
Yeah, for explanation, I'm a Presbyterian, and the explanation is that the Presbyterian form of government is not hierarchical like most other churches, and it's not general population like some other churches, where the whole congregation votes, and it's committees, assignments, volunteers, and people don't realize Madison took the polity, the governing informations for the Presbyterian Church when he wrote our Constitution. So there's the Senate is our session. Mm-hmm. The House of Representatives is the deacons who take care of the money. Then there's the pastor is usually would be the president. And so it's a very understandable and very efficient form of government.
Representative government.
Yep. So
Madison and others contributed that.
So like in politics in our country, you join the Presbyterian Church, they say, "Any volunteers?" And there's Chuck. I like missions.
Well, that was in 99, 2000, 2001. I raised my hand anytime that question was asked. So yeah. Let me add something, Joe. I didn't mention this in previous times I've been with you, but I went to a college in New England that was the birthplace of American foreign missions. And so I knew that. When I was an undergraduate, I was not going to church in those 4 years, but I knew that this was the place where these 5 students got together. They took refuge in a haystack from the rain that was coming. So they took refuge, they prayed, and the 5 of them devoted their lives to foreign mission. Back then we used the word foreign, today we'll say global. But they dedicated their lives to foreign mission, and that was in 1806 when that happened. And so as an alumnus of that college, that was part of my process too, part of the calling to serve in mission.
So this mission conference in San Diego inspired you to come back and say, why can't we do this?
About that time, yes. The pride, well, it was a transformative experience for me, and so it was a very rich experience. But to apply that, say, at First Pres, that didn't come quite yet. But Jim Whitty, who was parish associate, he's a missionary. He heads up Care Corps, a trauma response Christian ministry. He had the idea, and then Gary Demarest, I think, had the idea too, because a lot of mission conferences in the history of the Presbyterian Church. So they said, why don't we do a mission conference? And so I was the new elder, and I was raring to go. So they said that to me, and I said, well, let's get started. Let's check it out. Let's get started.
Make something clear, because it has evolved, and last time we talked, I think you had 4 other churches, maybe more or less now, who were co-sponsors and participants in this.
Yes, there are a number of partner churches, which I'm very happy the way that has worked out, because it's not just Presbyterian. And you and I would agree that God wants Christians to get along with each other and talk to each other and not spend their time with the issues, which to me usually are minor issues that separate denominations. And so we have strong partners with the Free Methodist Church.
That's up on the Mesa.
On the Mesa. A very large church. It's a very large church. With Ocean Hills Covenant Church and with Montecito Covenant Church, and also with El Montecito Church, because El Montecito went with the ECO, the Evangelical Covenant Presbyterians, and First Pres, my home church, is the PCUSA.
Yeah, I get criticism from sometimes Christians, but non-Christians, of look at all the schism, all these different churches. I once said, when people said, well, there's not much churching in Santa Barbara, I said, well, on Sunday morning, 30 or 40% of the people go to church. It's just they go to 120 different churches. And they say, yeah, see? And I said, yeah, that's God reaching out to people in many ways.
Well, that brings me back to the ecumenical, because again, First Pres, PCUSA, El Montecito, which is the Eco Presbyterian, we get along just fine because we're doing a mission conference. We're not dealing with issues that divide us. We're talking about God's mission.
Yeah, well, the polity, the form of government's the same. The presentation is really only slightly different between the First Pres and the Eco Pres and at El Montecito. Less robes because of the size of the church, no big formal choir. I go by the church every once in a while. I call it the church First Pres, and I thank God for the miracle of the upgrading of the sanctuary. Not an old sanctuary, but due to a gift by a gentleman in the church, they spent $1 million on upgrading it. Well, besides that being great for those who worship there, it's made it a hallmark in acoustics and outreach to the community from all sorts of, the Messiah sing-along and Westmont Symphony and all sorts of great presentations that the First Pres is able to do.
Jim, let's go ahead and mention his name. Bill Wagner was the major donor, and there's a plaque in the church for that. He didn't force us to be anonymous, although he's the kind of man who would happily say, "Don't use my name, just take my gift." But he was the major donor to that expensive project. So I agree with you. It's a gorgeous sanctuary now.
Wonderful man. We used to meet before Sunday morning service, and he and I would, in fact, he'd get a cup of donut holes. And if he didn't get it, I'd make sure he got it while he was in a wheelchair. And he passed away shortly after I moved to another church. There's only one word, a saint.
Yes.
And but that facility, which now brings us back to the mission conference, is just ideal for the kind of things that you do in the mission conference. Now, somebody mentioned to me today, it starts Saturday morning. The last time we met, you had a Friday evening musical and youth. Is a Friday?
Well, Friday, we expanded it more than 10 years ago to say, well, let's expand. And so we added a Friday evening session.
That's what I thought.
And that worked very well for a number of years. But the last couple of years, our registrations were down. The first thing to look for in causation would be the COVID, of course.
Yeah.
But we weren't sure just if that was the only reason. So the registrations were down. And so we decided this year to drop the Friday session. But our council members said, we want to have dinners on Friday evening so that people can gather around tables in homes, not on the campus of First Presbyterian Church, but gather in homes and have fellowship and start talking about the issues that are coming up at the mission conference.
Wow.
the issues that are, we can talk about this during our interview time, which are the areas of need that are local need, just within our reach, things that are calling for Christians to respond.
So the people who have signed up and everything, they do potlucks at different people's homes, or?
Well, the two, I'll mention their names, the two of the younger people on our council are Reverend Nicky Ramage from a Free Methodist Church and DJ Johnson, who was with Ocean Hills, but now he's part of this Kingdom Causes, an organization in town that deals with homelessness and things like that. So he's now employed by Kingdom Causes. They had the idea, and then June Michelson, I add her name too, June's about my age, and she's a wonderful lady, Ocean Hills. And they had this idea, let's have fellowship as a pre-conference. We'll call it a pre-conference. And this will be in homes, not in a less personal space. This will be in homes, and we'll just have a meal and have table fellowship, and we'll start talking about the homelessness, the human trafficking, and the two more. These are the issues that this year will be taken up by those four, and only those four will be taken up by this year's Santa Barbara Mission Conference.
So how do they pick those who come to the?
Well, it's Nikki's the lead person for this, and we're getting a good response too. At the beginning, our registration didn't show that on the website and in the printed brochures, but then we switched. This has to be part of your registration, and so she's the lead person on that. And so as she sees the people who register, she'll be placing people in homes, and a little bit of understanding of personalities, perhaps, and just try to get groups together that are going to have a good conversation.
Yeah.
And so we're getting a response too. People sign up for that even though they don't know which home they're going to or whatnot, but they like the idea. So we're again, this is a change. For about 10 years we've had the Friday evening session, but this is different. And so this more personal time in homes is catching on.
Yeah, that's why I get to ask the stupid questions, because I can ask a stupid question and they enlighten us. The morning, I always loved getting there about 8 o'clock in the morning because there's pastries and coffee. Still pastries and coffee?
May I introduce another name? Jan O'Connor. You know Jan very well, and she starts about August, September. Usually I say, Jan, are you up for another year? And so about August, September, she comes to my office and starts outlining the food hospitality for the Mission Conference, and she does it gorgeous. So you're going to get you're not going to get donut holes if you come early Saturday morning. You're going to get fresh fruit, you're going to get muffins, you're going to get all kinds of wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, of course, orange juice and coffee, that goes without saying.
So we'll take care of the food and then go through the conference. Is it bag lunches?
It's a box lunch.
Yeah.
And 3 Pickles Deli. We've used them for years. Yeah. They have an excellent sandwich. Fresh bread, beautiful fresh ingredients. There's
never enough time to talk and eat. And then, wait, we're late for the...
Well, I know. We do all this in one day, which is quite a challenge. But we do it all in one day. And so we'll give you about 70 or 80 minutes for the lunch hour. So.
Well, let's start with there's a term for them that you use, that the main speaker's morning, afternoon conclusion.
We call him the keynote speaker, like other conferences. And when everyone's in the same room, we call that the plenary session. Some people said, what's plenary? Well, I think as time goes by, if you go to conferences, you'll hear that word used. So in other words, we're all in the one room. This year, sanctuary in the morning, but then later on we're going to be in the CFC, the Christian Fellowship Center, which is the church's fellowship hall, because again, we want to have people around round tables as much as we can. And so the afternoon and the closing session will not be in the sanctuary, will be in the fellowship hall.
The opening session?
Sanctuary, yeah.
And who's the speaker?
The speaker is Robert Chow Romero. You might, if you haven't heard it, say, well, that's an unusual name, Robert Chow Romero. Romero is Latino, but Chow is Chinese. And so this man has a Mexican father and a Chinese mother, and he grew up in Mexico. And he's not only a speaker, he's a pastor, he's a professor at UCLA in Chicano studies, and he's a lawyer. So if you have legal problems that weekend, we'll get you, spend some time.
Is he going to medical school now?
That's about the only thing left is medical school, yeah. So he's been to seminary. He got his law degree from Berkeley, or what they call the law school there for UC.
Used to be Bolt Hall.
Bolt Hall, yes. Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Bolt Hall, and then his PhD's from UCLA in Latin American history. So, and then but if I may, he's known beyond the academic and so on. He's known for writing the book Brown Church. And he chose that title because Christianity was introduced by the Spaniards in the 16th century, right? We know that. But then, whether under the Catholic priests or otherwise, the church developed and grew and grew. And it's often overlooked. You know, if your textbooks come from England or Germany or America, you don't often think of the contributions of south of our border, at California-Arizona border. But a lot of contributions were made to the church and the carrying out of the Christian faith by the Brown Church. So he calls it the Brown Church. And he talks about some of the priests. If the Spanish priests were oppressive, he found people who went against that trend and said, wait a minute, the way you're treating the native people is not biblical. It doesn't come from Jesus Christ. So things like that. He writes about these people, these heroes along the way. And so it opens up to people who are not Hispanic the contributions of the Brown Church, the south of our border, Central America, Mexico, Central America, and South America. So this is where he comes from, if I may continue. He's also cares very much about immigration and racial justice. And so he is leading the breakouts. After he does his keynote speech, we have 4 breakout sessions following that. His is the one on immigration, because he spends a lot of time and energy on immigration, trying to solve
immigration.
Immigration, yeah. What to do with immigration, and when the immigrants come, how they are treated by the what I would call the indigenous, you and me, people of America, of the United States.
That's got to be if I was there, a very controversial topic, because of not the church, not the immigrants, but because of government, buying them, taking them all. When the Presbyterian Church in Santa Barbara, we had a young assistant pastor who rented a studio apartment from me. And if you remember the Vietnam War, there was a picture of a young woman when they fled Saigon, handing her baby to a Marine from the helicopter. Well, we sponsored her to the First Presbyterian Church, and in fact, they shared my studio apartment as just friends, and later married. And so the outreach to immigrants, I sadly feel has gone too far to the government rather than our church and individual responsibility.
Well, Christ tells us to take care of immigrants and, people who need, the poor and those are in prison. And, Matthew chapter 25, it goes down the list of the people in need. And so our response, Jesus tells us that's how we respond, to take care of people who need help.
Yeah, it's always, to me, a question between us shopping out our faith duties to the government or to an a nonprofit organization rather than the church and the individuals. And
Well, you mentioned Madison earlier. The thing about which I value very much, that in the United States we have a separation of church and state.
yeah,
So the church is there. The church will always be there. And so the government has their policies and so on, but we have great freedom as members of churches to do what we can.
yeah.
And unless the government stops us, we're free. And that's what the mission conference is about, things that we can do. We're going to talk about the needs and get good background from leading people. And then in the afternoon, we're going to move us toward our response. What is our action? As you leave the mission conference this year, what are you going to do? And what we do will be formed in groups. Group conversations will come up with action plans. What will we do? It might be a tiny step, it might be a big step, but we're going to do something as we come out of the conference.
Let's go to the breakouts. So he gives his opening sermon or speech and go to a breakout. He's immigration. What are the other 3 breakouts?
The other one, and it's getting a lot of sign-ups for the registration, and I probably said it earlier in our interview, but we're getting good registration this year. It's very encouraging, unlike the last couple of years.
Well, COVID, you were down for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that killed so many projects.
It did. In fact, it was the Montecito Covenant Church. That first year, it was January 2021, and they said, you can do your conference here in our sanctuary. Like, oh, thank you, because First Press had a very strict policy. And the average age of our members is high, and so we had anyway, that's not important. The next one, in terms of, as I look at registration now, the next one, the more popular for signups, is homelessness. Homelessness and affordable housing. You may have noticed that Santa Barbara is an expensive community for finding a place to live and paying your rent and so on. And of course, and also, you and I both know that this is the Santa Barbara Mission Conference, but it was created by the Presbytery of Santa Barbara. And we still have that point of view. So we have Ventura County, Santa Barbara County, San Luis Obispo County. So that's our point of view. We have churches, whether they're ECO or PCUSA, that begin in Simi Valley and end in Paso Robles. So that long stretch along the coast, we have the churches from all those. So that's the audience and the reach of our publicity, that this came out of the Santa Barbara Presbytery. So the 4 breakouts will be talking largely about local problems, like homelessness in Santa Barbara and Goleta, but every breakout leader is going to will know that we're talking to people in Thousand Oaks, in San Luis Obispo, in Ventura, and so again, what's covered in the breakouts in the conference this year will be applicable to where you live. Anyway, so where was I?
You were there waiting for my zinger.
I think I know now. Now I know where I was. But the second, the one is homeless. We mentioned immigration, and Romero will be leading that breakout in the morning. And the one on homelessness will be led by Father Reverend Bob Fox. Haralambos, I think, is the name that his church.
Greek Orthodox. I've had him on my show several times.
Well, fist bump. All right. Well, good.
He has a great witness of how he came to Christ, God.
I'll bet he does.
He was taught dancing. He was a techie, and he went for some reason up to Santa Cruz, and he went up on the mountaintop, and he just had a mountaintop conversion. He had been dating a gal in the Greek Orthodox Church just to be dating this beautiful woman, and he went back and got very involved.
He sure did.
And not Greek.
No. Beautiful woman. Okay, well, that's not the first time that's happened. Well, then he's leading the breakout in the morning on homelessness and affordable housing. And so at this point, let me say that the way we've designed, the way we planned this year's conference is that, again, there are four topics, only 4. And in the morning, we brought in leaders who give the biblical basis for these 4 areas. For example, for homelessness. What is said in the Old and New Testaments about homelessness and people that don't have homes, and the responsibility as Christians, the responsibility to those people, from those who have to those who have not. And in the afternoon is the practical breakout. Same thing, homelessness in the morning, homelessness in the afternoon, but the afternoon is the practical one. And you're going to be working in groups saying, okay, we've heard the biblical basis. Now, let's formulate our plans to deal with this. What are we going to do about homeless people in our community, whether it's Santa Barbara, Ventura, etc. And an affordable housing. What's within our power as we get together with other Christians? What's within our power to alleviate this problem or work toward a solution? And that's in the afternoon. And so, as I've already said, at the end of the afternoon breakout on homelessness, you're ready to go. You're ready to do something at least. And it's thoughtful too, not just a quick, let's go do this, but actually this is the working out in that afternoon breakout. What is your plan of action? So,
yeah, well, the homeless issue is complicated by the fact is that there's not one homeless group. And in fact, the Presbyterian Church for many years is one of the churches that provides the shelter when temperatures get below 40 or there's rain. And I had been a crusader against homeless crime on State Street. I mean, drunks, people attacking the women, just bad situation, and I would have them arrested, and unlike other people who complained, I would stay there and sign the complaint if necessary. And in fact, one time I started to bawl a guy out for yelling at people, and he went across to New Navy or that store.
Old Navy.
Yeah, sat down on the curb, and I, after a little bit, yelling, I went over and said, I've called the police. He said, thank you. I need a place to sleep and some food. And so there's not one homeless.
Right.
When we had our feeding and bedding during a storm, I came in one night and a wonderful old elder in the church who knew what I'd been doing said, you're not going to cause a problem with any of these people. I said, no. If I see somebody that I had arrested, I'll slip out the back door. Well, I probably, in the time I helped service there 3 or 4 times, saw 200 or 300 different homeless. Not one was the criminal element on State Street. Not one. These were all people who were grateful, and we could sit and talk and have dinner together, and then they'd have a place to sleep out of the weather. Mm-hmm. So homelessness is a multifaceted, and we have to look at it and find ways to provide homes, but homes without services are worthless. They just become a place to shoot up. So in Father Fox talking about this, do you think he'll get into that?
Well, of course. I mean, having a roof over that's one of the needs. That's one of the basic needs in life. But also rehabilitation and most, at least in this town, most homeless ministries have social services attached to them, because it's not just the fact that the rain is going somewhere other than the top of your head. It's not just that. There's a life again, and there's a multiplicity of conditions why someone is homeless. There are all sorts of reasons. Mm-hmm. And you know that. We both know that. But social services gets more toward the individual and what are the needs and what are the barriers. And
I'm so pleased to see the ministry to them and the churches being involved, because one of my criticisms has always been when you take action and government gets involved, oh, we have social workers. And of course, they'll be down on the street talking to these people from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. You know, they were social worker bureaucrats. They weren't like the ministers and people who were there to help as part of their faith. They were just bureaucrats who did their best for 40 hours a week. So homelessness. What about immigration? We can't have open borders.
Well, given the condition, this is where we begin with this year's mission conference. In the afternoon, it's what can we do about immigration, and it's things within our power. That's what that discussion will be, and that's for immigration. Oh, that's Carla Can. Let me drop another name. Carla Can succeeded Diane Martinez at the excuse me, at the Immigrant Hope, which is on the Shoreline Church on the west side of the freeway. On the west side, it's on San
Andreas?
San Andres.
Yeah.
San Andres, I think, street, yeah. It's
Name
a large church.
Yeah.
And that's where they're housed. Diane Martinez, for years, was the director of Immigrant Hope and did a wonderful job. Well, now it's Carla Can. And I spent an hour with her. We're talking about the upcoming conference, and I was getting to know her. She's the daughter of immigrants from Mexico. And so she's the director of Immigrant Hope now. And so she is the afternoon. So you have Robert Shaw Romero in the morning for immigration, and then she's leading the breakout in the afternoon, the practical aspect, formulating what are your plans to do about immigration.
Yeah, that church is when you cross
Carrillo.
Carrillo is that big white church on San Andreas, just a block off.
Just a left turn. As you're heading up toward the ocean, you turn left, yeah.
So how do we, it used to be with immigrants, as I said, that they were sponsored, they were cared for by their church and sponsors, and now they're turned loose and given big checks by the government.
Well, it still goes on. I mentioned Jim Whitty, the birth of the idea for the Santa Barbara Mission Conference. Well, he was part of that. But for example, the Care Corps, they go to Uganda and they go to Gaza. They used to go to Gaza. Of course, they're not going there now. But they also go to San Diego because there are churches in San Diego which took in immigrants from Afghanistan.
That's right.
And so it's what you're talking about still goes on. And of course, it takes leadership too. I mean, if Santa Barbara churches, they have to know that, well, the Afghan war is 2 years now since we pulled out of Afghanistan.
Since we retreated.
Yeah, so you have to have organization and leadership saying, okay, this church has some room, this has some room. Let's find families who will take in these immigrants, these refugees. They're refugees.
Yeah, because those who have escaped or being helped to escape end up in halfway camps in Europe, Turkey, and then they wait for a placement in the United States, and San Diego has been a pipeline for the Afghans, who many would be dead because they were collaborators.
Mm-hmm.
They were translators. They were part of helping churches. They were are hated by the Taliban. And there was a time when it was hard I forget what administration it was. It doesn't matter whether it was Republican or Democrat, where they didn't seem to understand that these people waiting in Mexico who were Afghan and had friends and family in San Diego needed to get across the border and be welcome immigrants. So I took us astray, I apologize, but so the morning session, the breakouts, lunch, we come back together.
And the closing session.
Yeah.
And that'll be in the hands of Robert Shaw Romero. And those will be in good hands too, because he's sensitive to the thing. Some of our people on our council went down to Los Angeles to spend some time with him. They went down on a Saturday morning and had an extended breakfast and got to talk to him. So he knows what this year's conference is about. This is the third time he's been here. Before he came as a breakout leader.
Yeah, I remember it once.
Yeah, and he was very popular. We noticed that a lot of people were coming out of his breakout session saying, "Well, that was great." So it'll be in his hands to do the closing session, and he will motivate us, and he'll draw on the themes of where you've been. This group has been immigration. This one has been homelessness, human trafficking. That's the 3 and 4. That's the third one I could mention. Human trafficking is one of the tracks. So he'll be bringing us together and sending us out. Also with the MCs that in charge, but he's he's our keynote speaker, so he'll be the lead person in that closing session.
Yeah, the human trafficking is white slavery mainly, even though they're colored people also, but it is slavery, and it's usually forcing mainly women, but also young men into prostitution and or very menial jobs in the East.
Sex, but also labor.
Yeah,
labor.
And, but they're slaves. A lot of them were immigrants who sold their soul to the cartel, and now they're never 30 years before they'll free themselves from that economic burden. We had I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we had a pastor, I don't know if he was a church or a lay pastor, who had a shop in Carpinteria. And they took care of mainly teenage girls who had either a child or had been trafficked, and they made soaps and candles and sold them on Linden Avenue. And I don't know if he's still active or. But
I'm trying to recall who that was.
But that's the kind of rehabilitation and ministry to people who are very damaged, very damaged. They need the family of Christ to see that they have a family. And so in that afternoon session, how or will they be able to delineate between the different kinds of human trafficking?
Well, I don't know where they're going to go with it. Now that's Jeff Schaefer. We're getting to the third and fourth one now. Jeff Schaefer is well known in town for local ministry, homeless ministry. The two things he spends most of his energy, I think, are homelessness, which he's been doing that for years, and then human trafficking. And so he's leading that. And in the afternoon is someone who works closely with him, a young graduate of Westmont named Kayla Peterson. So Kayla, and they were they're both with Kingdom Causes now, but Jeff is well known in this town. And so she's going to do the follow-up in the afternoon, the practical side of that. So,
Is she a Westmont graduate student or?
No, but she's a graduate there, and this is what she's doing with her life at this point, at least in her 20s. She's probably mid-20s now. So I don't know where they're going with that, but there are two things you can do: is help prevent human trafficking. That's one thing. And then if someone is rescued from slavery, then, as you say, making soap and carpentry, then you work with them, rehabilitation, spiritual rehabilitation, psychological rehabilitation, and then having something to do. You can't just sit you can't just sit under a tree and spend your day. You have to have something to do to be a healthy, active person. So, but then again, I don't know just where they're going to go with their breakout. But those are things that you can do as you work against this evil of human trafficking.
Yeah, well, the people being trafficked are largely without family, and so when the police break it up and they got the bad guys, and now these people, or the victims, are on the street, so to speak, this is where this kind of ministry can step in.
Yes.
And
May I mention the fourth one?
yes.
Creation care.
Creation
care. God created the world, and it's up to us to take care of it. So that's you might know it as environmentalism, but in the biblical realm, we call it creation care, caring for what God created. So if you change the oil in your car and you pour it out in the curbing and it goes into the ocean, you're not taking care of what God created. So that's the fourth. And we have a distinguished professor. Sandra Richter is the professor of, Old Testament. I know she's an expert in the Old Testament, or parts of the Old Testament, and she's leading the one on creation care. So along with her theology and so on, she's very, very keen in creation care and talking about it and writing about it too. And so she is leading the morning session. I think you want to start talking about the environment. I know you, Jim. But anyway, so I'll finish my sentence, okay, and then I'll let you control your own show. So that's the creation care, and so she's talking about the biblical basis. I mean, you can start with Genesis, right? It's the biblical basis, and then in the afternoon we have a follow-up from. Who's in the afternoon? Oh, come on, Chuck. And then the follow-up is in the afternoon. So, creation care. So those are the four.
Yeah, well, creation care, we live in a disposable society. I mean, there's just so much that we don't even try and recycle. And it's, we're filling the landfills, that were supposed to be there for 25 years are filled in 5. And a lot of it has to be burned, which isn't good for the environment. So unfortunately, I'm interested in her take on it because so much of what we try to do is counterproductive. Ealing's Park, when I came here off of Los Positas Road, was a city dump. And shortly afterwards, they quit dumping stuff there and began transporting it, and they opened Tahigas, but it was a landfill. And there was a history of us being, we can blame ourselves today as a disposable society, but it's a history of having things that we need to trash and we don't do it properly, so I'm interested in that aspect of, I hope.
That's the one you should sign up for. And if as your hip is recovering, if you can't go there in person, you can participate remotely because we're going to live stream. We've been doing this since COVID. We're live streaming the conference, and it's $10 less for general admission to do live streaming. So either way, and I think that's the breakout for you.
Well, a friend of mine in politics gave a speech for me in going back in the Central Committee in this next 4-year term, and she said, sometimes irritating, Jim Worthen, and then she gave all the wonderful things about me, but so I am sometimes irritating, as you know. But usually that irritation brings out more answers. And I'm interested in how do we, it's nice to separate the garbage from the recycle, it's nice to do in the garden and what's it called?
Compost. Yes,
Compost.
my wife does that.
And even to our orchards, the fruit falling, rather than going through with a scraper and picking it up, allowing it to be natural. Nature is a wonderful gift from God, and also a terrifying enemy to man. The storms, the fires, all that. And but allowing nature to answer some of our environmental problems is a blessing. Because, so
Indeed.
that's an afternoon.
Well, no, it's the track, and we're calling them tracks. You see, in the prior years, you come to the mission conference, and there's a whole variety of things you can do. So you pick something in the morning, and then something in the afternoon.
Different, yeah.
And some years we've had it as a track. One time, World Vision did a track on overpopulate something. I forget right now. I forget what it was. But there again, that the people who did the morning breakout followed through in the afternoon. This year, that's the plan. That's the name of the game. You pick your track. So if it's creation care, the morning breakout is the biblical basis. The afternoon breakout is the practical and the preparation to act. And that's how we designed it this year. And I think we're seeing the results with registrations. I think people are doing that. Of course, you're free. I mean, we have no police at the door saying, "Wait a minute, you did creation care in the morning. You're going to immigration in the afternoon." We won't do that. But the idea, the planning is that this is the process through the day. And so
after lunch in the fellowship hall, which is really large, and round tables, easy 150 people if you want, and all sitting at tables, how do we conclude?
Well, that'll be in the hands of the two MCs. The two MCs this year are I mentioned these before, June Michelson and DJ Johnson. They're both with the Ocean Hills Covenant Church. There's our ecumenism. And they're the MCs this year, and they're good friends. They know each other. They're different so far in age, but I mean, they're buddies. They just hit it off. They're just a great team. They're the MCs. Tom Steffen, who's been at the mission conference years and years, he's the pastor of the Presbyterian Church in Newbury Park. He's the conference pastor. He comes up every year. He's terrific. So he's the conference pastor. And so the closing session will be in the hands of the MCs, but mostly I think Dr. Romero. And again, he'll be recapping what we talked about, maybe get some comments from the audience, what did you do in your breakout, things like that. And then he'll be sending us out. He'll be motivating us. And then it's a commissioning and a sending, which is what a conference usually does. A commissioning means you ask, by the power of God, you are now commissioned to be agents of change, to be missionaries, if to use a traditional term, mission workers, going out into society and beginning to change the things that can be changed, beginning to use recycling instead of throwing your plastic cup in the trash, beginning to take the first step with immigration, study the problem, if the first thing is to study the problem, or to do like the people in San Diego, say, we have a spare bedroom. If someone has fled Afghanistan or you name it, or Gaza, you name it, maybe we have room for this person, so they have a home and they have people, and we have a way of showing them American society and how it works and how you
It's
avoid.
kind of back to the traditional sponsorship
Sure.
of
As old as the church, right? I mean, that's been as old as the church.
that means it's always the person
Yeah.
in Christ.
Yes.
And
So that's the closing, and so the commissioning is, God is commissioning you to do this, and then the sending, which is the next step, which we send you out. Go forth. By the power of God, go forth and begin to right the wrongs.
Was there coffee at that last?
Not just coffee, Jim. We have cookies and homemade cookies and coffee.
So typical Presbyterian,
Well, of
2 or
course.
3 hours, everybody's left the campus.
The Free Methodists and the Covenant and the ECO just had, well, the ECO is, they're just going to have to deal with this. I mean, we have food, we have plenty of food and hospitality, so they're just going to have to deal with that.
Well, it's a blessing, and again, that facility is really a gift from God. There was a time when we questioned, because I was there when it was built, when it was formed, when we
Sure.
marched up State Street from
Yeah.
the campus in town, and it was really prepared for 2,000 members. And then it slowly went down to, like all mainstream Protestant churches, and the Catholic Church slipped down to 400 probably members. But the facility has been used by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about my calling too. The mission conference in San Diego, my college experience where I went to the school where the global foreign missions began for America. And then the third thing is the huge facility we have at First Presbyterian Church. It's just asking to have conferences and large events come to that church. So that's part of the, you might say, the calling of the.
Well, now this is February 3rd. People can go to the website and sign up. What if they just all of a sudden wake up on the morning of February 3rd morning?
Come. Shirley Fender, she's at your church. Shirley Fender's been with it about 10 years now. She's been our registrar. She brings in her friends to help, and we're ready. Come walk in that morning.
Have a great spiritual day.
Yes,
and
come
fellowship.
And fellowship, and listen and sense God's call to right the wrongs, to go out and bring the love of Christ and the healing of Christ to these areas of great need.
And the Holy Spirit will speak differently to each person, and it's welcome.
Which is the fun of it, right? You don't know who and when and how, but it's there. And so.
Yeah, it's, I've had friends at the church who talked about not seeing immediate results. And I said, you don't know when these results may pop into your mind and action 10 years from now. You're being prepared. Chuck, thank you. February 3rd, we've had the website up, and look forward to seeing you.
Thank you, Jim. Once again, another year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.